It's all yours, Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you very much indeed. And sadly, I don't think Councillor Salmon has still joined us. But first of all, welcome everyone to the Joint Waste Collection Services Committee meeting this morning. Got quite a packed agenda to get through. First of all, can I have any apologies for absence? I'm not aware of any apologies for absence, and I had expected Councillor Salmon. So without further ado, the minutes of the last meeting. Can I have a show of hands, please, to agree the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 30th September 2021, please? All in agreement, please show your hands. I take it, therefore, those minutes have been agreed. Are there any declarations of interest anyone wishes to raise before we go to any of the points on the agenda? Obviously, if there are any declarations as we go along, please don't hesitate to inform me, just in case something comes to mind that you may have otherwise forgot to raise, just so that we're all covered. First of all, then we have item number 4 on the agenda, which is the budget monitoring for Q2, July to September 2021. I believe, is it Marco or Adrian to raise?
Good morning, Chairman. Adrian's going to take. I'm going to take this item.
Budget monitoring for Q2, July to September 2021. Okay, please go ahead. Marco or Adrian?
Good morning. Annex 1 shows that the contract management office costs, income and expenditure is predicting underspend for the year of 213,000. The majority of this underspend relates to salary rate on the salaries budget due to a number of vacant posts, as well as new staff joining lower grades, and a 1% cost of living increase that was built into the original budget, which did not happen. On the core variance, on the contract variances, sorry, the core contract is projecting an overspend of 193,000. This is related to the inflationary cost is greater than what we built into the budget, and this additional inflationary cost, it makes up the majority of that overspend. And on the variable side of the contract, there's a significant underspend relating to the suspension of the garden waste service, but it should be noted that the loss of income from this suspension exceeds any of the savings detailed, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adrian. So if we do this by show of hands, and if I miss anyone, Catherine, if you could advise me accordingly. Just before we do go on, I'm not sure we've got a sound problem because it seems I'm getting a lot of repeat sound. I don't know if anyone's getting the same thing, so I don't know whether there's any technical issues there, Catherine, but I think it's something we may have to keep an eye on as we progress through the meeting. But going back to Adrian, thank you, Adrian. Has anyone got any points they'd like to raise with Adrian, please? I can't see any hands go up. It's good to see Councillor Salmon has managed to join us. Welcome. Can you see any hands, Catherine?
Councillor Salmon has just popped the hand up.
Councillor Salmon, please.
Of course, this is just financial costs of underspend and overspend, but of course we do have the cost of reputation, and reputation cannot be priced. And when it comes to things like garden waste, it's our reputation which is in the very low figures at the moment. Just worth saying.
I think we can say we could note that. Thank you, Councillor Salmon. I think that's something that we all share that concern. I can't see any other hands showing on my screen. So thank you, Adrian, for that presentation. If we go on to the next item, which is item 5, which is the Joint Waste Solutions Budget 22-23, I believe either Joe or Helen is going to present this, please.
Yes, thank you. It's going to be me first, and then it will be Joe for part of it. So yeah, so it's this time of year where we're asking members to approve our budget for the following year. So I'm going to start by talking about the staffing and overheads budgets, and then Joe is going to go on to talk about the contract specific budgets after that. So as you know, that Joint Waste Solutions is a team that works for a number of sets of partners. So we work on managing the joint contract, but we also carry out work for the Surrey Environment Partnership and some functions for Surrey County Council. So the cost of the staff and overheads of the team is split between those partners, and those percentage splits are shown in Appendix 3 of the report. And then, as some of you might recall, we talked about a little bit about budgets for next year at SET members last week. So we just confirmed that the funding arrangements for the Surrey Environment Partnership side of things will remain the same next year as they have done this year. So that part is covered off. So there was a very small reference to that in this report. Just generally, we've managed to squeeze some budget reductions out of quite a few areas in the staffing and overhead side of things. So the change from this year to next year is shown in Appendix 4, and so you will see that we've managed to cut a little bit out of a fair number of the budgets. So one of these is the salaries budget, and we've had some savings arising from kind of changes mostly in the 2 director posts in the team, and then team costs as well. We've managed to get a little bit of a reduction in there. Some of that is due to some things like relocation allowances that were in place from when the team was originally set up and some staff were transferred in, that those are sort of finishing now. And then we've had some changes in car allowances and things like that as well. But then the biggest part of that budget is travel expenses. So we're assuming that whilst operational people will still need to be out and about, that I think some of the other travel expenses associated with attending meetings and things probably won't go back up to pre-COVID levels, just because of the prevalence of online meetings and things like that. So we've managed to get a bit of a cost reduction in there. And then the support costs are around the support that Surrey Heath Borough Council provides to us as the administering authority. So that's things like finance, legal, HR, ICT and democratic services. Most of those costs are staying the same next year, but we've managed to find a little bit of savings in the IT software side of things. And then the other costs that are shared across all the sets of partners are our office costs, which are remaining pretty much the same as this year. And then there's a very small health and safety budget as well. On the side of things that the joint contract partners only pay for, so there's things like legal supports specifically to do with the joint contract. So there's been a suggestion that we increase the budget in that a little bit next year, just to support the continuing support that we've needed from consultancies and things on that side of things. But we have managed to find a little bit of a budget reduction in communications and engagement. And then there's a small business continuity budget as well. I think that was most of the things. I guess on the staffing costs, probably just worth mentioning the assumptions around that. We're assuming that the team will stay the same in the following year, in that all posts will be occupied, and that anyone who is currently working part-time will continue to work part-time. And then we've also assumed that there is going to be a 1% cost of living increase, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. So I think so that's just one of the assumptions that's in there, and we've shown in one of the appendices that kind of the effect that any changes in that would have on the budget. So that's probably the biggest assumption that's in there at the moment that isn't completely certain. Aside from that, I think that's everything I wanted to mention. I didn't know, Chairman, whether it was worth pausing at that point to see if we've got any questions on that before we go over to the joint contract specific side of things that Joe's going to talk about.
No, thank you very much indeed. That is a good point to actually pause. So thank you for that. Can I ask anyone has any questions of the first part of this this part of the agenda to Helen, please? I've got no hands. However, I have a question, but I was going to go last, but I'll go first. Now, I may be a bit thick here, but I'm going to ask this question anyway, and it might be just something obvious. But if we go to page 21 on Appendix 5, what surprises me is just one thing that suddenly jumps out is the depot valuation. If you go across the top, you've got with Woking Borough Council 25,000 as opposed to Mole Valley, Elmbridge, and obviously Surrey Heath. Why is that such a variation? Is there a quick and easy answer to that? Have I missed something?
Is that something, Joe? Do you?
I'll
that?
hazard
Sorry,
a guess,
I'm not
although
sure.
I mean the valuations I believe were done independently at the start of the contract, and that I think it will be varying generally on the size of the depots and the types of facilities available. So the Woking depot is in a sort of more industrial estate type setup with office and parking availability, whereas for example Elmbridge and Surrey Heath have much larger sites with additional workshops, bulking facilities, etc. Available to them. So I think that's where those valuations will be differing from, is the size of site and facilities.
Just knowing, the question I based on is obviously knowing the sites, having visited the sites, and I appreciate the answer, but there is, they've got quite a major operation at in fact it's a very efficient operation at Woking, and that suddenly stuck out. But thank you very much for the answer. Thank you. And has anybody got any further questions? Well, thank you, Helen. And I think we'll go over to Joe now.
That's right. Yes. So I'll cover the contract specific costs. So as set out in the paper, the process for reviewing the AME core and variable charges as part of the budget setting process is summarised there. It includes firstly reviewing the quantities that are involved on those two sets of invoices, and then secondly factoring the effects of indexation into the contract rates. So the indices that we use and the weighting that's applied to these to calculate the uplift each year is also set out in the table in the paper on page 13. At the time of writing this, the August figures were available, and based on these, an uplift of 3.27% was applicable to the contract rates. But as we use a January figure, and those numbers aren't available until March, we obviously have to work with an estimate until that point. So in discussion with finance leads from the authorities and based on the fluctuations we've seen through the year to date, 4% has been used as the estimate in this proposed budget. We have included in the appendices the effects of an additional 1%, as we do anticipate that will continue to fluctuate until the prices are fixed based on the January indices. In fact, the most recent September figures came out last week after these, unfortunately, had been published, these papers, and that has seen an increase up to 3.76%. Other elements of the joint contract budgets include other contractor costs. This element of our budget is relatively small, but has been reduced given that we've procured some new arrangements for the disposal of textiles and in the last year, and those costs have decreased. And as David's question just touched on, there's depot costs and a savings guarantee set out there, but those don't change year on year. They're a fixed mechanism since all four partners joined the joint contract. Any questions on those areas? I'll be happy to answer them.
Members, do you have any questions to Joe on the second part of that presentation? I can't see any hands. Catherine, can you see any hands going up?
No, nothing from my end.
Okay, well, thank you, Helen, and thank you, Joe, for your presentations. We're now moving on to item 6, which
Sorry,
is
Councillor Mansfield, can I just interrupt?
yeah.
You just need to
Agree.
agree the recommendation to commend to your individual councils. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the prompt. Members, can we have a show of hands to agree, please? Thank you. I think that is unanimous. Is that with you, Catherine, as well? You've got, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Catherine, once again. So if we now move on to item number 6, which is the contract performance update, and I've got Kingsley and possibly Will. So Kingsley, to you.
Thank you, Chairman. No, Will's not here, but I'll be presenting today. So This is for Q2 up to September 2021, and the comparisons are based on the performance for 12 months to September 2021. To give some context for the Surrey-wide performance, tonnages remain higher than pre-pandemic levels still. DMR is up by 2.1%. Garden waste, including CRCs, is up by 4.1%. But there is still a move away from CRCs with a 5.8% increase in tonnage at the curbside. Food waste has gone up by 3.2%, and residual household has gone up by 6.6%. But if I say curbside and isolation, it's at 3.4%. So that's Surrey as a whole. So if I'm looking at the joint contracts, the general trends are due to the shortage of HGV drivers and the suspension of garden waste, this has been the biggest impact to recycling rates in the joint authorities. So Elmbridge, DMR was up by 4.5%, food waste was also up 1.3%, and residual up by 2.2%. However, garden waste was down by 5.7%. That made their monthly recycling rate 4% lower on average, and the rolling rate has decreased to 53.9%. For Mole Valley, DMR and food were up by 1.6% and 1.3% respectively. Green waste, as expected, was 13.2% decrease, and residual was up by 2.6%. So their rolling rate reduced from 56.6% to 55.7%. Surrey Heath, DMR tonnages were down by 3.1%, which was below the average county-wide increase. Food was up by 1.2%. As expected, garden waste was down by 3.3%, and residual was up by 6.7%. And their rate also fell, and that was at 60.1% in September. Woking, DMR and food tonnages were both up by 3.1%, residual was up by 3.3%, and then garden was down by 10%, around 10%, and their rate fell to 53.2%. If there are any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Members, any questions to Kingsley? I can't see any hands.
Oh, Councillor Tilling.
Yes, thank you. I was just surprised when you went through the figures that garden waste, you said in Elmbridge, was reduced by 5.7%. That seems a small percentage, given that we haven't collected very much over the last 6 months.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That does seem quite unusual. This could also be due to weather conditions. Let me just check our data to make sure that is correct. I believe that is.
They had an extra collection. Others didn't have.
I was just going to jump in, Kingsley, and say it might be due to the way the collection suspensions fell and impacting Elmbridge slightly later than some of the other authority areas who were suspended earlier. But also with it being a rolling rate, I think it's not going to be such a hit, that hit won't be showing quite as dramatically. But I think you'll see that increase when we come to the next quarter reporting potentially.
Yeah, the data seems to be correct on that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I can't see any hands. So therefore the recommendation is that we're asked to discuss and comment on this report and the annexes. So I think we have done that. And so I think we can agree that we will now move on to the next item. And the next item is the item 7, which is the joint contract work programme, and that I believe is Jo.
Actually, that's me, Pat.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
I
that's
apologise.
fine. It's okay, not a problem. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm just going to talk briefly through this item. It's the second time that we've produced an update in this format. The aim of it obviously is to capture the work that we're doing on your behalf and provide progress updates on projects throughout the year. So we hope that you're finding it useful, but of course we're very open to any comments or suggestions for how we can do it differently. I'm not going to go through it page by page. It's obviously quite a long report, so I'm just going to pull out and highlight a few key points. You'll have seen in the report that the issue that has dominated a lot of our time over the past 3 months is mentioned in the very first section, and it's the one that's just been talked about in Kingsley's item. And that, of course, is the driver shortage issues and its impacts. So the first section of the report covers the management of the complaints, which have obviously increased because of the service suspension. And then later in the report, the crisis management section captures the work that we've been doing with Amy to try and get to a point where we could agree a programme of one-off collections across the contract area over the past few months, and then obviously the recovery period beyond that, which has now started a new set of collections happening. The communications work that we've been doing and that my team have been doing on this is also captured under Objective 5. Again, this has obviously kept us busy, as it has with the authority comms teams, and there's been lots to do with resident comms, FAQs for customer services. We've had some media interest, and we've obviously also had customer queries and complaints that come through social media, through Twitter. Despite that, and that work obviously being, quite dominant on time, we have also been able to undertake some other proactive communications. We've been amplifying the Surrey Environment Partnership campaigns and getting some good awareness of the messages and engagement from residents. So we boost those county-wide campaigns in the joint contract area to and target by postcode to make sure that we're reaching the right people. You'll also have seen that we promoted the compost bin discount scheme. I know you were keen for us to do that, particularly with the garden waste suspension in place. So we did that in the joint contract area and that went well. Almost all of the sales county-wide came from the 4 areas sort of since September. We've also produced the annual service guides during this past 3 months. That's a Surrey Environment Partnership funded project, but it's tailored for each area. So one is done individually for each area and they were all delivered last month. And in an update to the report, I can confirm that the Surrey Environment Partnership funded waste reduction scheme incentive scheme, that's the trial that we're running in Elmbridge, that did go ahead and launch at the beginning of November. A couple of other pieces of work to highlight. There's been work that's been ongoing regarding the white space integrations. There may be more updates on that later from Amy, and there have been sort of regular project meetings on that, talking timescales, etc., and the scope of the work. And I've been involved in that as well, looking at the branding and how we integrate with the Joint Waste Solutions website. And then a couple of final points to highlight. We've got an improved position on invoicing from Q1. The outstanding months where they're affected by the IT issues have now been agreed. And Jo and her team have been doing some really good engagement on communal properties with managing agents and housing associations to look at collection points where we've had either residents or crews that have given feedback on storage or collection issues. So those have been moving forward too. So yeah, I'll finish there and just ask if there's any questions or comments, and obviously back to the chair for agreement to the recommendation to note the update. Thank you.
So before we do the recommendation, go for the recommendation, members, have you got any questions you'd like to ask? And I do apologise, Pat, I had on my script for Jo, but I apologise, ask Pat. Caroline, Councillor Salmon.
I noticed that Pat said that they worked with Amy to get the one-off collections and the recovery period going. I just wondered if there is any plans at this point in time for moving from recovery into a system of through a route of a system back into 2 weekly, or if there isn't any plan to move that recovery specifically on.
I think I'll pass that on over to you, Jo, probably. Do you want to try and answer that?
Thank you. And obviously, if colleagues from Amy want to comment as well. At the moment, we have collections underway in Woking. They're due to finish at the end of this week, with then a cycle of collections starting in Moore Valley from Monday, and then plans to continue that cycle one at a time and complete the 4 areas by collecting in Surrey Heath and Elmbridge in the new year. We'll be firming up those dates very shortly, I think, so we can start to plan the communications on those. Beyond that, we haven't had any further proposals from Amy about how to specifically continue on to that point, but that discussion is very much continuing. And I don't know if Danielle or Lara want to come in with any more there, or whether you've got updates in your presentation shortly to cover that.
Thank you, Jo. Would anyone from Amy like to comment at this stage before I go to Councillor Tilling? Daniel, would you like to say anything from Amy's perspective?
I think, thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Just to say that we are confident that those collections can continue after Christmas, one at a time for Surrey Heath and Elmbridge. And then we're looking to see how quickly we can resume that more frequent service in all of the areas, depending on what resource we have available and driver headcount that we have coming back to join us.
So in summary, just to help Councillor Salmon with a reply, do we, and before I come to Councillor Tilling, do you have a date that you would say you are hopeful that you could be towards March or April?
I think at this time, with the drivers we've got on the intensive HGV course internally, we would hope that by the end of April, we would be looking to be revisiting areas a lot more frequently than what we are currently, but conscious that there are a lot of factors that affect those driver numbers coming through the door.
Thank you for that response, and for that for the answer. And I'm sure that in fact this subject may come on later on in the meeting. So, Councillor Tilling.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a very brief comment on Pat's statement that in Elmbridge we're starting this Green Redeem scheme, which we started a few weeks ago. And hopefully, I assume that the idea would be that if we can reduce the waste from residents, that this will be rolled out across other boroughs in Surrey. Of some concern is that I think we've so far only got about 280 something residents have subscribed to the scheme, despite promoting it quite actively on our usual comms channels. So it is perhaps something that JWS and ourselves, our own comms teams, need to pick up on, is that at the moment the take-up rate is pretty poor. So we're not going to actually save too much waste if it's only applicable to about 280 households. So it may be something for JWS, for SEP and ourselves to do something about, to try and improve the comms and try and get a greater uptake of residents. But that's where we are at the moment, which is a little bit disappointing.
I can give you a short update on that. I think that number has gone up now. So I think it's more like 350, I think. I mean, yes, it has started slow. I think part of the issue, as I understand it from talking to Green Redeem about it, is they would normally have done more promotion in the run up to it, but because obviously it was delayed, the sort of launch date was put back due to the issues that were ongoing with garden waste. That didn't happen. So it's been a bit of a slower start than they would normally expect. But there is quite a lot of activity sort of going on. The school scheme has now been set up and they've started to see interest in that. So that enables people to donate points that they earn through the scheme to local schools. And they're already starting to see some people coming through as a result of that. And there's a lot of other kind of targeted activity that's being planned. So, it's early days. I think, we're sort of say only a month in and didn't really have the run into it that perhaps would have normally happened. But ultimately, Councillor Tilling, this is a trial, so I mean, obviously we've gone with this because there's been success in this type of thing before. What we don't know is how it's going to work in Surrey, and the idea of doing it in one area and trialling it somewhere is to see how that works. But we're absolutely working very closely with them, both my team and the comms team at Elmbridge, who are being extremely helpful and getting involved in that too. So I think we'll all be throwing everything at it to sort of try and make sure it is a success. But we will be reporting on that now that it's kind of up and running. We'll be able to come back for each committee and let members know how it's going. And fingers crossed we'll see some good improvements.
Thank you very much for that reply, Pat. Has anyone got any further questions they'd like to ask of this particular part of the agenda? I'll take that as a no, so therefore I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if I may. Just out of interest, I suppose putting on my NHS hat on as well, what sort of freedom of information requests you get, just out of curiosity? Because we are plagued by them in the NHS. I'm just curious as to what. Just give me a couple of examples.
It's tricky because I have two very capable managers who deal with most of them, so I'm fortunate enough that a lot of them don't pass my desk. But I think it varies quite widely from sort of commercial inquiries about contract lengths and those sorts of things to and fleet, which to ones submitted either by the media or residents that are related to the services. So sometimes they are in relation to costs or service delivery aspects. So there's quite a range, and interestingly, we do tend to deal with a lot of inquiries for all four authorities, obviously, but we don't always get the same ones across the board. Sometimes all four get the same one, and other times they're a bit more targeted.
All right, thank you. The other point I was just going to raise really was just to say I've been attending the Environment Partnership campaign meetings that you've been putting out on the teams, and I think they've been absolutely brilliant. The feedback I've had from the people that have attended, those updates are so valuable and so worthwhile. And so I pass on the comments to you that it's been nothing but positive feedback. And the other point I'd just like to say at this point, where you've got a point to do with community events, I'd just like to say thanks to Joe and also to Sarah. I had to personally do a presentation to a year 5 or year 6 group of children at a local school, and there's nothing like getting in on the baseline, talking about recycling and the environment. And these young people were more switched on than many councillors that I work with, I can assure you. They really were an absolute inspiration, and it was a bit like a Jeremy Paxman moment, to be honest with you. They really put me on the spot, so that was good. But anyway, thank you very much indeed. I digress, but we're moving now on to item 8 and the Amy improvement plan. I'm going to hedge my bets here because I've got either Laura or Daniel.
That will be myself starting off the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we got slides, Tina? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So this first slide here, it just touches on the improvement strategy we have in place for 2021. You'll see down the left-hand side, we've got the pillars of that improvement strategy with some brief updates next to them as to things that we have already achieved this year. So if we start with zero code, the main thing that we've pushed forward with there is dialing in to Surrey Police, have a direct link with them to tackle crew abuse that they're experiencing out on their rounds. So our new compliance manager has started to form a relationship there, and we're hoping that we get some better feedback and traction on reporting those incidences and giving feedback to the frontline crews around what Surrey Police can do to aid us in dealing with that. In terms of route optimisation, improvement to street cleansing schedules as part of the migration to white space, and round changes and optimisation being reviewed as part of the COVID tonnages and commercial discussions. Contract improvements, both parties are now aligned in the calculation and methodology of performance payments, so reduction in KPI failures, additional properties added to communal wee and textile collections in Woking, and they are currently receiving a fortnightly collection at those properties. Environmental, we've been really tackling our green driver behaviour, and we've managed to see a 97% score on the green driver behaviour in the past month. The remaining 3% are being tackled by us having regular conversations with those drivers. So we're having conversations around harsh braking, harsh acceleration, etc., and monitoring their performance. The biggest improvement in the IT pillar will be the migration over to white space, and the estimated go live date is January 2022. The customer journey, we continue to reduce the escalation of any customer complaints to stage 2 with better management of those initial complaints that come in, and resolving disputes quickly. And then in terms of community engagement, we supported the Junior Citizens event this year, back in the summertime, and we've already signed up to support that event again in March next year, doing a similar session to what we've done previously, with speaking to the school children around the environmental impacts of recycling, and having a fun interactive session with them. In addition to that, we're supporting IDOT in Mole Valley with litter picking areas. We've already done 2 this year, but aim to sign up to do more in the coming months.
Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lara White. I'm joined you on the call via telephone. I do apologise, I'm having internet issues this morning. So I can take the presentation from here, if Danielle can control the slides for me. So moving on to our biggest challenge in the contract driver shortage. We currently have 24 vacancies on the contract, 8 of which are long-term sickness that we are dealing with those individuals to try to bring them back to the workplace. From our agency support, which is where we usually go when we have vacancies or need to cover long-term sickness, we've been able to recover 7 drivers, which leaves us with an ongoing vacancy of 17 drivers across the 4 depots. This is actually an increase from last month, as we've seen a continuation of that turnover being eradicated by the additional salaries that people are being offered to go to work for other opportunities and other contractors. And that -17 is the underlying number. We do have additional absences to that, which would be sickness absences, COVID absences, and annual leave. But underlying, if everybody else was in work, not being on leave, etc., then we would still have 17 driver vacancies for the patch. Moving to the following slide. In terms of mitigation, how are we dealing with these challenges? So the challenges that we face currently are national driver shortage. I'm sure you're all aware. This is being caused by COVID, Brexit, and seasonal demand. We have intensive competition from other people needing HGV drivers. So there are huge salaries out there, and there's many rises in salaries for many basic driving roles. And there's also large starting bonuses to be obtained by candidates that move between tracks. Within our own resource, we do have HGV driving able people who choose not to facilitate that qualification. They actually do other roles within our business, and that may be because they've decided they want to step down from that responsibility of driving such a large vehicle, and also the responsibility of managing the crew. Or they may have had a previous accident or near miss, which has put them into a position where they don't feel confident anymore driving that vehicle. We did start apprenticeships in terms of HGV driving in the summer of 21. However, we saw a large fallout from this course when they realised they had to complete an English and Maths GCSE to gain a level C grade. This has been put forward to people who probably didn't enjoy school first time round, and the thought of sitting through to gain a qualification was something that put them off taking the course as a whole. Intensive training, we are offering intensive training to all our employees. We have had some uptake, but not as much as we would like, and this is because there's a lack of confidence in the team to be that leader and also to drive such a big vehicle. We can't underestimate the enormity of what we're asking people to do in reality compared to driving your average family car. And we've also reached out to external contractors for assistance. However, they reported back saying that they felt this was a conflict of interest when they could be a competitor on another day. So how are we trying to mitigate those challenges, if you like? From the national shortage point of view, we have offered both new starter and retention bonuses to our existing teams at a cost of circa £350,000. We have, in terms of competition, we are looking to offer a market supplement that would bring our salaries combined with the bonuses above the £30,000 mark, which both our feedback from applicants applying and people leaving has told us is the value that they're looking for their services, around the £30,000 mark and above, which is not quite where we currently sit, but the market supplement would take us to that level. We are HGV drivers that are in our existing force that don't undertake that role at the moment. We are revisiting training and offering driver-supported experiences for them to try and regain their confidence. With the apprentices, these are still very much available to employees. However, we are offering the intensive course outside of the apprenticeship that does not involve the application of both the English and the maths exams. Although we recognise it's very important skills to have, we also recognise the feedback from our employees. So in terms of the intensive course, we have 8 internal applicants, and we've now started to advertise externally for candidates. Each candidate needs about 6 months worth of support, and also the cost of the training. So that is about a £17,000 per employee cost to put them through that intensive course and support them during that period. And in terms of the third-party contractor, we have found a way through with one contractor, and that's by extending our sweeper support after our leasing contract this year, and we will retain a sweeper till the end of March, which releases one of our sweeper drivers to be able to drive on our main line. The other large sweeper drivers, again, it's a confidence issue, do not wish to drive on the main line, and they wish to stay with their vehicles. So, but we have managed to gain some support by working in a slightly different way with a contractor we have an existing relationship with. Always. Hoped it would have calmed down by now, but it hasn't, and we see that going into next year. That compiled with our average turnover at the moment, which is about 2.5 people a month, means that without doing anything different, we're going to continue to make that vacancy number larger. Moving to the bottom spreadsheet, where we have added the option of the market supplement, we believe this will bring in people both from wanting to learn to drive with us, so stepping away from their current job, learning a new skill, and then wanting to drive. Again, those initial applicants to that advert are all looking for around the £30,000 mark. We believe the market supplement will help us to actually convert people when they come to the open day to become drivers for Amy. The market supplement in itself will bring people in, and it will also help reduce our average turnover back to a normal level, which we would previously see at about 1 driver per month. So what does that look like to yourselves in terms of that roadmap back to recovery? So between January and April, we believe that we can take that current vacancy level down from 17 to just 8. To get to that number, we believe we would get 3 from our intensive courses, 2 from new starters bonuses, 2 from open days, and 6 from the market supplement. Those numbers combined with the average turnover that would still apply in those months, and with the current vacancies, means that we would have a balance of about -8 drivers. So quite a substantial change between January and April, moving from -17 to -8. Going on from that, between May and August, we will continue that recruitment drive. And one thing that will come into play from there is our ethical resourcing. So we are working with both refugee organisations, as well as a company that is going to start their own ethical recruitment agency at the early part of 2022, whereby they're looking to resource from markets such as bringing the homeless back into work, as well as ex-offenders, etc. And we're hoping that although in general they're focusing on that entry-level job, so probably our loader positions, we're hoping that we can entice maybe one of those individuals to want to join us in the intensive course, and or we may even have an individual that has been on unfortunate times and has actually had a previous HGV driving experience. So very much looking to work in the community of how we ethically resource our team as well. So between May and August, we look to, again, drive down that gap in our vacancies from 8 to 3, and then look to where we can offer 100% service of this garden waste. and then moving between September and December. We'd like to think we would end the year with a net average of about 1 driver vacancy by the time we get to the end of 2022, and having reinstated that full service kind of September moving forward. Our nervousness around saying that 100% would be there before during May and August is just that we have the high volume annual leave months in the summer there for July and August. So that is what our recovery plan, our roadmap, if you like, looks like by using all those different avenues of resourcing. So just looking now in terms of the intensive driving, which is where we think we're going to get quite a few people converting from the jobs they do now to a HGV driving role. The initial 8 have currently all completed their medicals. They've all applied for their provisional licences, and we have 5 out of the 80 that have a date for the theory test. This is the first step in being able to then move forward into that training in the new year. We have 3 that we are awaiting theory test dates for, but we are hoping to get those test dates done and completed before the end of December. And that completes our presentation today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much to Danielle and to Laura. If we can go back to the main screen, that's great, superb, thanks for that. Members, do you have any questions, please? We show of hands for who would like to ask a question of that particular part of our agenda. Councillor Tilling.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I'm a little bit disturbed about is that, so you're saying this intensive training for 8 of your workers is going to start in the new year. They've only just passed their medicals and got their provisional licenses. This problem with HGV drivers started way back in early August. Surely advertising amongst your current workers and externally should have started way back in August. In fact, it was well predicted that there would be an HGV driver shortage across the country from the Road Haulage Association way back at the end of 2020. Why has it taken so long for you to start this intensive training?
I think back in the summer, we felt that we would stem the flow of people leaving our business through the new starter bonuses and the retention bonuses. So we felt that we had quite a lot of resourcing opportunities, that we could use in order to bring those people and keep those people in the business. And I guess, in honesty, we didn't foresee the level of leavers that we have since experienced. In terms of the training in itself, we are governed by availability of medicals, we're governed by availability of theory tests, and so on and so forth. So as soon as we started on this journey, for us now, it's about securing those dates, which again are highly competitive for, because lots of people are venturing into this skill level given the salaries that are being offered.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tilling. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. I don't believe that Amy have any idea the impact on the councils that their failure to deliver this service really has occurred. We have had to really struggle, and our residents are nasty to us, and they consistently say, why are other districts doing this when ours doesn't get the garden waste collection? They're cancelling their contracts and we're having to pay them back because of the failure to do this, and because of your failure to actually see that these problems were something you should have tackled earlier. I understand the ad for external drivers went in this week. You could have put an ad in a lot earlier. And I think you need to really look at this, because at the whole process that you are following in recruiting and retaining your staff, because you're expecting us to bail you out, whereas in fact, we are the ones who are taking a lot of flack on this. And it's not fair on the councils, and it's not fair on the officers. and it's not fair on JWS that you have not looked into seeing what was happening. And somebody has to tell you that, and that somebody is going to be me. I want to know now how you really do plan to push things forward. I want to know what your logistic planning is to get our 2 weekly garden service back. You're doing one district at a time. That's taking 6 vehicles because of the loads. You need to start looking at how do you get that back. You're saying you're still short of drivers. Why nobody else is this short of drivers? So I want to know what logistic plan you really have, because you're now saying you won't get us back until September or August next year. And that's not acceptable. We have been under the impression that we will get this service back in April, and your figures that you've just given us will not get us back in April. So how are you going to deal with it?
Thank you, Councillor Salmon, Daniel and Joe, I think. Or Lara, sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I would think that one's best directed at Lara.
Yeah, indeed, sorry, Lara and
okay.
Danielle, sorry. My mistake.
So the plan that we've just presented gives back weekly collection from April. So the residents obviously are having an impact at the moment, and we can only apologise for that, where the collections are once every 12 weeks at the moment, and we're going to ramp that up to once weekly in April. So that's 50% to return to normal service. Between the months of May and August, if the availability is there, we will of course opt those services as soon as it's available to us to do a weekly collection. Sorry, not to do a bi-weekly collection, which is
we don't do weekly, we do bi-weekly.
Yes, bi-weekly collection, which is the normal plan. So as soon as we have enough drivers between that time period, which we do estimate would be between May and August, then we would put that fully back in. Our only concern is, as I said, is just that level of holiday that our teams are like to take between the period of July and August. So we will limit to an extent, but obviously that is the time period that people generally go on holiday in the UK. That's a high peak time to us. We are working really hard behind the scenes to try to get HGV drivers. We are at the bottom end of that market, and one of the reasons that we have seen a bigger tranche of leavers is that we don't have the final salary pensions that many other services are privy to, in terms of a reason to stay and a reason to continue that process. What we have seen is that a lot of our long-term people are still with us, and what we're seeing is that top level of people are more transient than maybe our more long-term teams are. Having gone out into the field and actually spent some time with the teams talking about them about why they work for us and where they've come from before, we see that people come to us quite often from the airport where they've done shift work, and they come to us because they want to have a simpler life. Maybe they've done a much more high-powered role in the past, and this is just a simpler life for them to move into their retirement type situation. So that's another thing that we have done, go out into the field and just understand from our team, straight from the horse's mouth about why they actually come to work for us in the first place. So gaining that understanding, and then, as I said previously, going out to those people that have rejected offers from us and just trying to understand the marketplace, just trying to understand what they would need in order to come and work for Amy is something else that we've been out there doing to assess where we really need to be in the marketplace to gain that attraction back and come and work for us. And it is unfortunately financially driven.
Thank you, Laura, and apologies for getting the direction wrong there. As to who should have answered that question. Thank you. I don't know, Danielle, whether you want to say anything further in response from Amy's point of view?
Nothing further from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your reply, Lara. I go over to Councillor Kevin Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to echo partly what Councillor Salmon's just said. I know we shouldn't repeat ourselves or repeat what goes on in meetings, but I just simply do not see an organisation that actually cares, if I'm honest. If I think back to the problem, I've been portfolio holder here and doing this for 2.5 years. And the problems that I was stunned that existed in the first week of when I picked up the portfolio are still there. You know, things like the useless IT system that cannot enable people to report miscollections in a timely way, or it's so complex that they can't do it. That the communication between the contact center and the depot is just totally busted. Nobody has a clue, and it results in the residents then getting upset, extremely upset, and to the point where we've just had an earlier point in this meeting was abuse of the crews. Councillor Salmon's right in that the abuse also gets directed at officers in JWS. It gets it certainly gets sent in the direction of the councillors. You know, and I sit there and I get called a liar. I get called incompetent. I get called making promises that I can't keep. And this is because Amy are utterly unfit for purpose, useless and incapable at a management and a strategy level of actually delivering. I get where you're coming from in terms of the roadmap that you've just laid out. It is, I'll make the point now, completely unacceptable. It is utterly unacceptable to still be sitting here now, 4 or 5 months into what, as far as I'm concerned, is bordering on a crisis, to say that we're still 9 months away from where we can consider getting back to normal isn't good enough. It's not good enough. Somebody needs to deal with it. And it needs to be back on stream much, much sooner. And whatever needs to be done to get there. But I've got one final point that I want to make, and it frightens the life out of me, which is seeing a bit about white space coming in. Because having questioned the IT function of Amy, it worries me that that's got any hope of being delivered and not producing far more hassle and aggravation when that white space comes on stream in January. And I think we need to do, I'd like to see a lot more about testing, what's gone on, to have any confidence, because I know who's going to get it in the neck. It will be the drivers, the crewmen and the councillors that get it in the neck when if this doesn't work properly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I feel that Daniel and Larry should have the right of reply to some of the points and comments that have been made by Councillor Davis. Would you like to make any comments?
I mean, I think I would just want to say that the driver issue is a national problem. It's not something that Amy has, it's not solely to Amy, and it certainly isn't solely to the Surrey contract. I do recognise that we probably didn't see it as a bigger problem as it actually is in the initial stages. And I believe that since we have acted and done everything in our power to try to retain the teams that we have, as well as grow our own teams through this intervention, if you like, in terms of offering this intensive driver course. Back in the summer, we offered the apprenticeship, and we felt that was going to help support our teams. And obviously, the intensive course is a much faster resolution to bringing people into the business who can actually drive. In terms of white space, we have the overlap with our existing in-cab system, and we will implement the IT for white space in conjunction with JWS, and only at a time when everybody is comfortable about the rollout and progress. And there are regular meetings on a weekly and bi-weekly basis to discuss this project to ensure that there is full integration before we move forward.
Thank you, Laura. Danielle, do you wish to make comments as right of reply?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone else got any points they'd like to raise just before I just make a comment? Okay, thank you. It's over to me. I would like to just make it very clear. I share, Daniel, I point this out to yourself and Lara, I share some of the comments that have been made, if not all the comments by Councillor Salmon and Councillor Davis. I'm extremely concerned on a couple of points that they raised, and that is the abuse to the crews and the abuse to the GWS team. I accept the point you make that it is a national issue. What I don't accept is the response that you've given to this national issue, given the forecasting of the problems that were ahead of us. And to find out when advertisements are only being placed for drivers currently, I think is a little bit intolerable. I'd also just go back to a point that Lara made, which I think is I'm a little bit miffed over the comment, actually. I've actually been out with the crews on, more than one occasion. And I don't mean just following around behind with a white van. I mean sitting in the cab and getting out and pushing and pulling. And to make the comment that they wanted, people are applying to have, and I quote, a simpler life. I don't think I'd ever look at, having been with the guys and the girls out, in the field, I would describe that in any way as a simple life. And I think the way that they're being abused currently is a total misconception. And I'd like you to say that that comment won't be ever used again regards the teams. So thank you very much indeed for your presentation. We'll leave that there. And I think it's just basically that was an update. We are now going on to item 9, which will be the exclusion of public and press. And I just have to ask